is the Orange Zone, sponsored by Apex Entertainment.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Orange Zone podcast. Ashley Wenskoski, Samantha Croston, and we are two reporters based in Syracuse, New York. Thanks for joining us. No Lawrence Moten today, but we wanted to yap, and we felt like this would be a nice little therapeutic yapping session. Ideally, Moten will be back next week to sort of recap the basketball season. Just so you guys know, we're going to be talking Syracuse basketball today. We're also going to be talking Syracuse football and even some other interesting topics within both of those two sports. So if you're interested in football or basketball, hang around, stick with us, and make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. How are you feeling? How are you doing?
Good. A lot of Syracuse football is back on the brain a little bit right after Monday was pro day for Kyle McCord and company that are looking towards the NFL draft at the end of April. So it was good to kind of get back in the football realm again. Spring practices start at the end of this week. And I think everybody's excited to turn their attention to football with the obvious shortcomings of the basketball season.
Which I completely understand. We're going to start with basketball first and wrap it up, then move on to bigger and brighter things. Syracuse's season is over. I guess I'll just say it like that.
Honestly, thank God. I really just can't sugarcoat it anymore.
That's pretty much the bullet point.
I feel relief.
And I understand why. Syracuse lost to the 6th seed SMU after beating the 11 seed Florida State in the ACC tournament. It wasn't surprising. It was a 73-53 loss. It was that sort of game that was close until it wasn't. It was good until it wasn't. Yeah. And honestly, if I was writing a book about this year's men's basketball season, perhaps that's what I'd call it. Because there were so many games that were close and then they weren't at all.
Right.
I think SMU ultimately was just a better team. And I was happy that Syracuse was able to beat Florida State. But beyond that, I don't have so many inspiring things to say.
Yeah, we had kind of discussed with Moten in our prior episodes, how would you feel? Would one win in the ACC tournament make you feel a little better? Would two wins make you feel a little better? I mean, I think if they beat SMU, that's a different story. Now you're talking about making somewhat of a little bit of a run in the conference tournament. I think one win over a dead-in-the-water, lame duck head coach Florida State team does not make me feel any way, shape, or form better about what transpired for Syracuse basketball.
Yeah, shout out to Leonard Hamilton, who by all accounts is resigning. There was also a really kind of nice, cool interview with him after the game, and it made me realize just how important coaches really are to sports. But I agree with you. I think we said that a few weeks ago, and I still feel the same way now. Unless they were able to go on some deep run, which Moten even agreed with, I don't feel any differently now just because they beat one team in the ACC tournament. That's what March is, and anything can happen. And ultimately, the end of the season, to me, I guess I'd say it felt fitting.
Yeah.
A 20-point loss where Adrian Autry comes up short on a couple of the answers in the post-game press conference is pretty much what I expected.
I was just about to go there. So what made headlines after that loss was Adrian Autry's post-game press conference. A couple things there. He, one, was asked by a reporter if he had a message to the fan base after this disappointing season. He declined to answer, said, I'm not going to answer that right now. And then after that, which I'm going to ask how you feel about, he kind of said that he did not like the local media's coverage of this team this season. I know we both have thoughts regarding that.
That was actually, that particular question was a question asked by Donna DeToto from Syracuse.com, and I thought it was a really good question that would warrant that kind of response. And yes, he did ultimately end up saying that, or at least part of his response, I don't remember the exact wording of the question, so I'm not going to try and paraphrase it, but I know that his response did at some point, regard the media, which sort of took a little bit of a twist. And he ultimately ended up saying that in some way, shape, or form, he felt that some of the coverage was unfair. He said that he understands that it's a struggling team, but he thought that at times it was too much. Again, I'm not here to speculate on what exactly he means by that. I thought that answer was terrible.
I agree.
There's really no way around it. I just thought, again, it's like we're talking about this, last night off air, but it's just one of those things where it feels like an excuse.
Yeah.
It feels sort of empty and it feels like it falls very flat and very short of taking accountability.
Yeah.
The media didn't cover the team negatively. I think that's something, well, they did. Actually, that's a lie. They did cover the team negatively, but that's because the team sucked.
Yeah.
And that's not me saying it. That's not even an opinion. That's just a fact.
Right.
That's something that bothered me about that sentiment. Media covers teams in a negative light when teams don't perform well.
Yeah.
That's what leads to negative media coverage. Again, I'd need to know or see examples of what he means, but I'm not here to necessarily defend the media either. I can only speak for myself in saying anything that I've covered pertaining to the Syracuse men's basketball team this season was true and numbers-based and factual. And if the facts are upsetting, then that is a reflection of how the game was played.
Yeah, that was my few takeaways from that. First of all, I mean, he had it up on the tee. The first kind of question that I discussed there when it was asked if he had a message to the fan base, and he's like, I don't want to answer that right now. That is literally your moment as a head coach to kind of rally people around you and galvanize the community and say, look, this year sucked. There was another college head coach, I forget who it was, but who had a really, I think it might have been an ACC coach, along those same lines, who had a disappointing season, and in his postgame got up there and like really said, thanks for sticking with us, like whatever. And Autry said that at other occasions. He said that at the last game in the Dome, the last regular season game. But to me, to just toss that answer away was a mistake. It's your job as the head coach to rally the community and the fan base around you, even during a disappointing season. And of course, that goes hand in hand with NIL. So to not answer that question, I don't know if he just wasn't in the mood, whether he just felt like it was not the time to get into all that at the ACC tournament. I'm not sure, but to me, that was a miss. And then secondarily, like you were talking about with the, I think the word was unfair coverage from the media with him saying that, I mean, to be quite frank, I think that's a joke. Like, unfair, you had the worst Syracuse basketball team in 50 years. And I think, at least from what I saw, maybe he is referring to some instance that neither of us are thinking about right now. But at least the local media that we're very entrenched in, I think covered the team fairly. I think even up until the December, January point, really wanted to see things turn around for this team and was focusing on different storylines like Eddie Lampkin's transfer story and JJ Starling being a local kid. I don't think the narrative shifted negatively until it really had to, which at that point, it's January, it's February, you're not competitive, the writing's on the wall. So for him to say that, I just think, and we were talking about this last night, like you touched on, I think a lot of people fall in the camp that I fall in. Adrian Autry, I tried to root for him. I'm still rooting for him because I root for Syracuse basketball, but I really, really tried to hold out and be like, okay, you know, he's a Boeheim product. He is a Syracuse alumni. He, you know, came from an era of Syracuse basketball that's very important to this school with GMAC and all that. Like, I really tried to hold out and be an Autry supporter. And I think where things changed for me as the fan, not as the reporter, but as the Syracuse fan this season, was midway through the year when I just felt like he was getting up there and making excuses. There seemed to be a turning point this year with the losses when they started piling up in December, January, where it turned from, his press conferences turned into a lack of accountability and excuse making. Yes, Donnie got hurt. Yes, JJ got hurt for a few weeks. That happens to every team. Then he's getting up there sometimes talking about the lack of NIL, the lack of money. Yes, that's a factor. But as the head coach, I don't want to hear that from you. Whether that's fair or not, whether you have a lack of resources or not, that's not what I'm looking for from the head coach of the team.
I understand. And just to make sure that we do get the wording right, I pulled it up because we had it on our CMY Central Instagram. He said the way the team was covered was a little disappointing. Okay. Not unfair. So I think that part's important. He said, you know, obviously the team's struggling, but I thought that some of it was a little bit too much. Just so we have that.
Well, the way they performed was a little disappointing.
Listen, I'm still, everything you said is true. I just want to make sure we had that right. I totally agree. Yeah, I mean, that part, just, you know, the fact that, I mean, how many times are we talking about all the different statistics of there are students at Syracuse who are seniors who did not see them in the NCAA tournament. We're going on year 4. Yeah. It's like, it's the kind of stuff that is so unfamiliar or unheard of to a Syracuse fan base that, of course, we have to talk about it. It's historic. Yeah. It's historically bad. So we're not going to, you know, frame it in any other way. Like, that's just the reality and the facts. And to your point, you know, you talk about NIL. I feel like this is the kind of thing we've been talking about all season, but we kind of had to air it out, you know? Like, yes, the NIL is important, and I'm not going to throw him under the bus and say that money didn't play a factor here. There were things that I believe, in my heart, were out of his control, and I do believe that he got put into a Syracuse University situation where the university, perhaps even some of the people and change makers and leaders before him, didn't really set him up for success in the world of NIL, and other schools had more success. That being said, I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. The two most important factors now in college athletics are A, NIL, and B, your personality as a head coach and whether or not you can actually get people to want to come to your school. That is the area where I needed to see some change and some different things from him. Excuses don't sell.
No.
People needed to see accountability. People needed to see you being real. And there are some people who have said to me, and I understand this, that not every head coach is a great public speaker. Not every head coach is trained for the media and understands how to speak to the media and say the right things. And I get all of that. But end of the day, that is a part of the job of being a head coach, is being able to reel people in. And I'm not saying to say clickbaity things or say things that, spark up a storm, but I am saying that you have to have a personality that resonates with people.
Yeah.
And you have to say the right things to make sure that the fan base always still wants to support you despite the wins or losses. I don't know that he did a fantastic job with that this season.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. At some point, the tone turned to excuses. The word disappointing was used many a time. And true as that may be, I needed a little bit more diversity in some of the things that were being said to really feel like change was being made.
Not only do excuses and a lack of accountability not sell your school to future recruits and guys in the portal and players, they also don't sell tickets. That's just what I'm saying from a fan perspective. You have the worst season in Syracuse basketball in decades and decades since Jim Boeheim turned this program into what it was. And I just wanted to see a little bit more of going up there and being like, look, we know how bad this was. It's on me. We saw that a couple times, a couple flashes in the pan of that at press conferences. But I think when it mattered most, it wasn't there. And to rally a community around supporting this team, which is what he needs. Look, if you want NIL, it's like the chicken or the egg. If you need more NIL, the way to get it is not by saying that the media coverage was disappointing and you're not happy with the fan base and X, Y, and Z. You know what I mean? That's not exactly, if I was a head coach, how I would think to go about that. So it's certainly interesting. We've talked about it on here many a time. I agree with you. It's a culmination of things. He didn't have the resources that he needed, as exposed in that Mike Waters article about the lack of NIL. But he also, I think, had some shortcomings as a coach, as a leader, as a coach, as a media personality, as a coach on the court. And that's what fans really have a broader question about heading into next season.
And I understand why. Listen, it kind of bleeds into another topic we wanted to discuss, which is that a bad down season like this, it doesn't just impact the one season. I think it impacts some of the seasons going forward, and it gives you an uncertain feeling about the future. Because end of the day, until there are more rules and regulations in place about what NIL really is and where people can go, as far as I can see right now, players are kind of able to go anywhere and not have to sit a year out.
Yeah.
That's a dangerous thing, because it's not just about the money. It's about, if you're a Northeast kid, then where are you looking in New York that you want to go? And I'll tell you what, there's another team in New York that all of a sudden, very quickly, is low-key becoming New York's team.
Not only are they knocking on the door, they bang down the door this year.
Unbelievable what St. John's has done. Surprise, that's who we're talking about. In the tournament, 2 seed, and we'll get to UNC, so don't think we forgot about that. We're going to take a beat on that too. But they're in the tournament as a 2 seed. It's this team that just totally turned things around under the leadership of Rick Pitino. And Wow, there are some things that we could say about some missed opportunities there.
Yeah.
And congrats to St. John's, by the way, because that's a sick story, and I'm totally bandwagoning them the rest of the way.
Totally. The Johnnies, what some people called New York's team, now they're totally back in that realm, I think, especially for the city. They've galvanized New York City around them. I mean, the Garden the other day for the Big East Championship was crazy.
Empire State Building's lit up.
Yeah.
Y'all made it.
Yeah, they won the Big East for the first time in, I believe it's 16 years. But I think the takeaway from all of that, and we can do the toxic Syracuse comparisons, right? Rick Pitino was an assistant at Syracuse. Kaderi Richmond came here as a freshman and then went on his way and now is the star of that team. We could talk about all of that, but what we can also talk about is how Rick Pitino did all that in 1 year at St. John's and has been on the record talking about how maybe they don't have as much NIL as you might think either. I just think it's a comparison in how a lot of, Moten's been sitting on this podcast being like, you need to give a head coach 3 to 5 years. I'm not trying to say that he's wrong. Maybe in some instances that is the case. Maybe in some programs it does require that amount of time. But Rick Pitino turned around a machine in 1 year's time.
And in this particular instance, in college athletics, time does not heal all wounds.
No.
There need to be more things happening and more proactive measures being taken to make sure that Syracuse is able to compete, because I know that hurts people to say and it's heartbreaking to think about, but obviously there was a long period of time where Syracuse was New York's basketball school and it's a prime location, even just nationwide. It's not that anymore.
No.
And all of a sudden, St. John's is becoming that.
And obviously, when you have Syracuse left the Big East, there's that too.
Right. When you have a school that's in such close proximity to Syracuse, but is doing so much better, that's where things start to get dangerous from a commit and recruit standpoint. Because again, even somebody like Kai and Anthony, do you think there are any conversations happening where he's talking to dad, like, check out what's happening here?
I know. It is kind of interesting to think about, right? Because those Big East teams that are historically great at basketball, which Syracuse once was, St. John's, UConn, you can go on.
And was when Carmelo played here,
right,
by the way.
But they're also not Power 5 schools, Power 4 schools. So it's interesting. I don't really know, and I'm not educated enough to speak on the NIL disparities that might go on there, right? But you'd have to think that schools like those, like a UConn who won a national championship last year, like, do have the resources to be competitive in the college basketball NIL space. So yeah, for a kid like Kai and Anthony that's from New York, how much of a player kind of are those teams in the Northeast? It's interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And again, that's where, does money play a part in it? I'm sure. But there are other things too. And I think that's our point and takeaway from today. The other thing is, just to take a beat on it, so there was one team that got into the field that people were feeling a little bit unhappy with. That is, unless you're a UNC fan, then you were thrilled.
Team, yeah.
But yeah, UNC snuck their way in. Let's just say people had thoughts about it. I'm going to just kind of give a little bit of something, from an article that I found that I think kind of sums up some of it. It says, with 6 national championships, the Tar Heels are one of college basketball's most storied programs, but this was not one of their vintage seasons. At 22-13, they had produced one of the country's most polarizing resumes because of their 1-12 record against the most valuable opponents on their schedule, what the NCAA calls Quad 1, which values beating highly rated teams, particularly on the road. This is an article from NBC News, just to give credit where it deserves. They did go 8-2 in Quad 2 games, but the other big factor here, of course, is the fact that the committee is chaired by Bubba Cunningham, North Carolina's athletic director.
Yeah.
There's a lot of factors at play here. What do you think?
Yeah, they have one Quad 1 win. They're playing in the first 4 round tonight on Tuesday, so playing in kind of that play-in game. And the number 11 seed is the worst seed that they've ever had in the history of the tournament. I think there were schools that were outraged by this because their team was not included in March Madness. West Virginia, prime among them. Namely West Virginia. There was like some talk of lawsuits there. West Virginia was upset, to say the least. I think it's an interesting discussion, right? What did you say his title was? Their athletic director.
It says the committee is chaired by.
Right, the chair of the NCAA Tournament committee, so to speak. I mean, and also I believe I saw, got a bonus of over $100,000 if North Carolina made the tournament, which they did. So that to me is, we're dancing along some sketchy lines there.
I understand. This part I think is important to point out now too. It says Keith Gill, the selection committee's vice chair, told CBS after the bracket was announced that committee policies require the AD of any school to recuse themselves and actually leave the room for those discussions, and they're not allowed to participate in the vote either. But listen, when you got friends in high places, yo.
Well, he was outside the door.
I mean, also just, in my mind, I'm not ready to go on the record and say there was foul play there. I'm actually more so as a sociology major in college, just speaking on people and interactions and how that must feel.
Yeah.
Like, end of the day, if you're voting for the prom queen, and a candidate is sitting right outside the room,
right?
She's about to be like, so who'd you vote for?
No, exactly.
And what are you going to say? I voted for somebody else.
And listen, the tournament, I think when you're talking about bubble teams, we've seen this with Syracuse in the past, long ago, because they haven't been in the bubble conversation forever. But the committee does take into consideration sometimes, I think, a school's like historical, like basketball, I guess,
do
resume.
They though? Like actually in judging
when
it?
It comes down to, I think, some not as the first thing. Obviously, you're looking at wins and losses and records and whatnot, but I think that's in people's minds on occasion when it comes into a bubble team. Was that at play with North Carolina this year? I think absolutely, by looking at the result of it. I think where people got really upset was they had one Quad 1 win. I mean, West Virginia and those other teams that were on the bubble looking to get in had way more than that in terms of Quad 1 wins.
That's terrible.
And so that to me just seems unfair. The quad system, obviously kind of newer to college basketball, but it really is a good way to measure not only a team's win and losses and their record, but how they do against the best teams in the country.
I guess my point and my takeaway from it is just, Quad 1 wins is obviously just in some way just kind of a system that people made up. But if that is your system that you tell people, this is what the NCAA tournament is based on, in part, is net rankings and strength of schedule and other things that involve this quad one win, then you need to stick to it come decision time.
No matter if it's North Carolina or Duke or UConn or whoever it may be.
History doesn't matter at that point.
Yeah.
You said quad one wins were important.
Yeah.
And UNC fell incredibly short of that.
Right.
And there were other teams who had the right things on their resume to be able to get in based on those standards that the people in that room set up or at least knew going into it that is how you make these decisions.
Yeah.
Like, that is where I'm having a hard time understanding how this happened. I get it. When it's come tournament time in any sport, there are times where, of course, fan bases are going to feel a little bit hurt. And we've seen this before in football. We've seen it in even like lacrosse with Notre Dame. But I think you have to be man enough, not man enough, I'm going to take that back, man enough, woman enough, bold enough to say when the entire scope of people who love a sport on Twitter, including experts and analysts and broadcasters, are saying that decision was messed up, it was messed up.
Right.
Like, this wasn't really one of those things where I even feel like it's 50-50. I feel like it's the people who think it's messed up and UNC fans.
And now UNC, let's just talk about the team themselves. I mean, they're in a tough spot, right? So tonight in the first four, they play San Diego State. If they win that game tonight, they'll go on Friday to play number 6 seed Ole Miss. All I can say is, if today's Tuesday, if UNC loses to San Diego State tonight, the world might explode. And by the world, I mean those other bubble teams who feel like they should have been there as opposed to North Carolina.
There's going to be some freaking outrage.
Yeah.
And if you're somebody who voted, you need to be prepared for that.
Yeah.
Because, again, and who knows, maybe they go on this run. But even if they do, who's to say that one of the other teams couldn't have done that?
Right.
Now they'll never know.
Now it's a what-if game.
Right. And honestly, if I was one of the athletes on that team, that's hard.
Yeah.
Like, this will be something that's covered for, a couple days or maybe a couple weeks, and then most people will forget about it. But if you are, West Virginia fan or player, like, this is going to stick with you for the rest of your life. And I think that, again, it is not easy to be on these committees, I'm sure, and it's much easier from the outside to critique. But I really hope, like, all I can do is just hope that, the history and the legacy and the fact that, the AD was involved didn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
Because if they did, that sucks.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, in any of these situations, you hope that whatever corruption or whatever is not at play. We're just speculating. We really don't know. But I think not only was it a tough look, I mean, that's a fact, right? That guy got that bonus of a lot of money that they made the tournament. And that is something, I don't know if there'll be any sort of NCAA looking into this or whatever, but it's definitely, the optics are not good.
May I go out on a limb and say that perhaps athletic directors just should not be involved at all?
Well, really that, right? Like, can't we have someone separate who either works for the NCAA or holds some sort of other role that is not directly affiliated with not only a team, but one of the premier college basketball programs in the country,
right,
chairing this committee?
Honestly, I don't think that involvement should have been there at all, because, like, how would this situation not happen,
And I'm not saying that as, a reporter who covers a different ACC team. If John Wildhack was the chair of the NCAA Tournament Committee, Syracuse's athletic director, and he got up there and maybe unjustly Syracuse is in the tournament, I would say the exact same thing. Truly, that is not a biased take.
No, I mean, listen, Syracuse wasn't making it in even if
Oh,
John
they weren't even
Wildhack was
sniffing
the
it.
only voter.
No.
But, like, I understand your point. Like it would just have a bad look to it.
No,
and
right.
I think it was a mistake. So hopefully they learn from it. It is what it is. All right, we're going to move on to a little bit of football stuff. If you guys are interested in football, so are we, and we're so excited. And obviously football is a long time away, but we have camp coming up, and I think that's going to be exciting. And Ashley just finished up Pro Day. So let's start there. How was Pro Day? Walk us through that.
Oh, it was great. It was quite lengthy. I was by no way, shape, or form prepared for the amount of time that I was going to spend there, because last year, Syracuse...
It was a long day yesterday,
It was
guys.
a long day, but last year there was like no NFL prospects at Syracuse. There was the one corner and a couple Cortland kids. This year, it's like there's 15 of them out there. Then there was like an A group, basically, which was the Syracuse kids. Then there was this B group of Cortland kids and Ithaca kids, from around the region.
I was hoping that would happen.
Yeah. Super long. There was, I believe, 12 guys ended up working out for Syracuse. It was supposed to be 14, but there was a couple of injuries. Obviously, the big show was Kyle McCord's throwing. That's why there was a ton of scouts there. A Syracuse spokesperson said over 30 teams. There's 32 teams in the NFL.
There were 31
so you can
teams
take
there,
that
you
to mean
guys.
that there were 31 teams there.
There were 31 teams.
Over 50 NFL scouts from those 31 D1 teams. No, I do not know which was the team that was missing, so please
We
just
wish
don't
we
start
did.
with that.
And for the
I couldn't
record, we
tell you.
asked.
We did ask. We didn't get the answer. Anyways, it was a packed house. It was quite the event. That's, I guess, what happens when you have a top 5 quarterback in the draft throwing. Kind of crazy to think how this is the final, really, NFL audition for these guys. 5 Syracuse players were at the Combine. McCord, Aronde Gadsden, Elijah Clark, LaQuinn Allen, and who was the 5th one? The 5th one was...
Did you say Marlo
Fidel
Wax?
Diggs. Fidel
Okay.
Diggs. No, Wax was not at the Combine. Barron was not
okay.
at the Combine. So I think this day was more important for like a Marlo Wax, a Justin Barron, a Jackson Meeks, who was not at the Combine. So this was like really their chance in front of NFL scouts. Obviously, some of those guys played in like the Senior Bowl and those types of showcases. But Marlo Wax ran his 40. I got some differings. Some said it was like a 4.51. Some said like a 4.55, 4.56. But either way, for a guy of his size, for a linebacker, he was moving. And it was especially, I think, notable because he was coming back from that injury last season. Cinco, Elijah Clark, went on the record and said he thought Marlo was playing at 55% at the end of last year. Kind of came back early to help the team. He came back for, I believe it was that Pittsburgh game, kind of midway through the year. So I think you're just so, like, you're so excited for these guys to go move on to the NFL in the next chapter of their careers. And then at the same time, I'm standing there and I'm almost like sad that this class of Syracuse football players is leaving, because what a group. I mean, I cannot remember, forget about Fran Brown and this era, I cannot remember in recent history when Syracuse football has had this many guys who are either going to get drafted or catch on to an NFL roster. I think there's 8 to 10 of them in that room that legitimately could be on a roster next season.
And I know that all fans see this, but like understand this is historic too, just in a different way. You know, like this is a big deal that this is happening. And I was even looking up, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I was reading an article from last year that I believe said that there, you know, it was listed as there were over 20 scouts there. This year it was around 50, you said, right?
Yeah.
30 teams this year. I don't think there were 30 teams there last year. The numbers were way up.
Yeah.
Way up.
Yeah.
And it definitely goes to, like, honestly, that made me feel happy and proud. You know, like that must be a cool feeling for Fran Brown to see how many teams showed up. And I'll tell you what, that one team that didn't, oh, I'd love to know who, like, imagine it's like the Chiefs or something.
I would love to know who it is.
Have to know.
Yeah, I think it's just like a guy like McCord, obviously, you know, getting to know him all year and kind of his like career resurrection after Ohio State and all of that. It's so nice to see these guys, even guys like, you know, an OG and a Marlo, who have been here at Syracuse for 5 years. They were here for the Dino era. They were here for the transition. LaQuinn Allen, everything he went through with his suspension. Like, to see that this is the time, right? It's here. Like, you feel like they're like little birds leaving the nest. Like, they're finally being sent off to the NFL. It's crazy.
Fly.
Go fly.
No, literally, I agree with you. And honestly, the thing that struck me, Ashley was there yesterday, so I just looked through the clips afterwards, but was the support that these guys show one another. Like, truly humbling to listen to the way that they talk about Kyle and what they believe him to be. I think somebody said he's the next Tom Brady somewhere in there.
Golden jacket. I mean, there was Kyle hype.
Kyle hype for sure. But even with Marlo, you know, watching that clip back, that 40-yard dash had the crowd. I mean, it was electric in there.
Yeah.
Like, honestly, and to see the teammates supporting one each other that way, it definitely goes to show, I think, the kind of culture that Fran Brown helped to create, but also just how good and nice these guys are. I think a lot of these football players this year in particular are just good people.
Yeah, Marlo had a great day workout-wise, and I think he needed it. I think it's no secret that injury kind of put him back a little bit last year. I think heading into last season, he was more on those draft boards, whatnot. He really hasn't been since the injury, so hopefully he can be either a late-round pick or catch on somewhere as an undrafted free agent. So it's really just happy to see that for him, and it's kind of weird, right? You kind of feel like you get to know these guys in a way. Like, even afterwards, like Marlo's like grandma who's been around all season. It's just like Fran has done such a great job with allowing the families. McCord's parents and his girlfriend are standing right there while he's throwing. Like, Fran, and this is a testament to him, has done a phenomenal job at allowing these guys to feel comfortable with having their families around for these big moments, which is great to see too.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a secret. Family is important to Fran.
Yeah.
Fran's family guy.
Elijah Clark, Cinco, said that, you know, this family environment around this team and whatnot, he was like, you know, even if I make the NFL and stuff, I'll come back here in the winter to Syracuse and I'll do my off-season workouts here. Like, I love Fran. This is my family.
But you know what? that kind of bleeds into this a little bit off topic, but I think it's important. Today, Fran was meeting up with a community bank. I am not exactly remembering the full name of it.
In Syracuse.
It is a bank in Syracuse that they are essentially going to partner with, and it's going to be some sort of an NIL deal. You know, the guys on the team are going to be able to open bank accounts. Financial literacy is involved. He wants to get them set up for success beyond just being here. But, you know, questions were asked where he's essentially talking about the fact that he kind of wants to get to a place, Fran, this is, where players want to come back. I think not only because they were successful as football players, but because they're just successful adults and they want to come back and they want to give. And he said in his last line, and this stuck with me in this quote, he was like, that's how you build not just a Syracuse football team, but a program.
Yep.
And that honestly goes to show me, you know, I think, and I know that people probably see it at this point, but the next 10 years, if Fran Brown really does stay here through that time and through when his daughter goes to college, which was his initial promise, it's going to be a changed program.
Yeah.
Perhaps in some ways, maybe even a changed community.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see what he's able to accomplish based on, you know, some of the big lofty promises that he makes. But he seems like the kind of guy who keeps his promises. So we'll see what happens. But I think that's why you're, again, just starting to see that a lot of these guys are great kids. Is because, like, Fran Brown doesn't just care about the football. Heard at an event the other day that he literally is going and doing, like, checks in the classrooms to make sure that all the kids are there. And that they're sitting, like, I think towards the front. That's important to him. No hats.
And that they're dressed nicely.
Oh yeah, no, they got to be dressed. You guys had to hear this. Like, he has to be dressed nicely. This was at the New York State High School Coaches Association Clinic. That's a mouthful. It was at the Turning Stone. Basically, a bunch of high school football coaches get together though, and they talk about ideas and recruiting and whatnot. He was saying the most interesting things about what he expects from his players. No hats allowed indoors. Like, it is really about this, like, respectful culture.
Yeah.
And that's how you build young men, you know?
No, definitely. I think that's a testament to him. I think Fran Brown, we've said this many a time, looks for not only the player, but the person. And I think that's really important when not just building a team, but also a culture. Along with what Clark said about coming back to work in the offseason, I mean, I would want to come back here to work out too. Have you seen that new building that oh my God, Syracuse football put out the video of the new football training facility. There's a barber shop in there, a pool, a hot tub, a sauna.
Girl. Like,
Shout out to the Lallies, first of all.
Wait, legit. The Lallies showed out. This is like next level. Like, we don't have the photos so we can't show you, but I'm talking high end. Like the weight room. I know the barber shop. That's so awesome.
I saw the barber chairs. I was like, what? They're just like getting a nice little fresh cut, like in the middle. What is going on?
I have no idea. But you know what? It actually, you know who it makes me think about, oddly?
What?
Isn't the guy, the high school guy who does the haircuts, Jetty Higdon Jr.?
Yeah. From Corcoran.
I genuinely almost wonder if you end up like seeing him up there doing some sort of NIL deal. He's giving everybody cuts.
That'd be awesome.
You know what? Mark down the fact that I said this because I'm going to make that happen. That'd be a cool NIL deal for him to get. All right, we got one last kicker for you. The recording's only on for 7 more minutes, so we got to make it quick.
We've been yapping.
We've been talking.
I know.
Every single time we're like, no, it shouldn't last that long, and then we start talking.
Well, this is what happens. We love our guests. We love Mungro and Moten, but when you leave the two of us alone, it's just like, bup, 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 bup.
Our director's like literally laughing in like a yeah, that's true kind of way.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. So the last thing is, yesterday we get this little one-liner that comes out from Deion Sanders, Colorado football head coach, Coach Prime, baby. We are big. I think. I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm a big Coach Prime supporter.
As am I.
Love that dude.
Yeah.
And he essentially said that he would like to compete against somebody else in the spring game. He thinks that that would make fans happy as opposed to Colorado just playing each other, which I think is generally speaking how some of those spring games work. And Coach Brown, being the interesting human being that he is like,
Francis.
Screw it. Francis does some crazy things sometimes. And I think he was like, I honest to God think he opened Twitter. Like, I don't think people run his account. I think he opened Twitter. He's like, I'd like to do that. And he tweeted back at him and he said, well, come to Colorado for 3 days. We'd love to do that.
I do not think that Francis runs this by John Wildhack. I don't think he runs it by Tyler Cady, the communications guy. I think he opens his phone and he just tweets.
Oh, yeah.
100%.
Like, I think he just tweets like a fan. He's like, oh, that's interesting. I'll just tweet at him. Meanwhile, he's getting like thousands and thousands of likes.
What if
blowing
anything?
up, literally blowing up all of the internet. And he's just like, oh, it sounds fun. Sure, we'll do it.
We'll come to Boulder for 3 days.
That brings us to the fact that right now that's actually not allowed.
Yeah, the NCAA bylaws do not allow that currently, and also it's in a month. So I know Colorado's spring game is, I believe, April 19th. Syracuse's is 1 week before, April 12th, which they just moved back to the Dome, which I'm excited about. To me, I know some people were excited about it being at the soccer stadium because of the Billy Joel concert. Billy Joel concert got canceled. It's back at the Dome. It just feels more like an event at the Dome. I don't know. I prefer it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
The soccer stadium,
No, and capacity. I mean, everybody's so into this team. I was like, that's going to be a nightmare. The soccer stadium holds like 2,000 people.
Yeah, that would have been a disaster class. There would have been more than 2,000 people there. Feel better, Billy Joel, though, on that note.
Feel better,
genuinely.
Billy Joel. Anyway, all that to say is both of their spring games are either in like a month to 3 weeks. Syracuse starting those spring practices at the end of this week on Friday. So I think it would have been hard to pull off logistically, but maybe those NCAA bylaws change next year. Maybe they change that. I don't know, but it's a great idea. Colorado's spring game is televised on ESPN2. All I have to say is when Francis picks up his phone and does some of these like Fran bombs, instead of Woj bombs,
it's such a Fran bomb.
He knows what he's doing. Like, this guy understands how to get Syracuse back into the national scope of college football. Do you know what it would do for Syracuse to go out there to Colorado to play Deion Sanders and Colorado football on ESPN for the spring game? I mean, all of a sudden now you have thousands of more eyes on your program.
I completely agree. And mind you, like, let's just not forget to mention that both of these head coaches are, quote, freaking machines.
Oh my God.
Like, we'd have the time of our lives. There would be thousands of happy fans and at least 2 happy freaking broadcasters.
Oh my God. Fran versus Deion would just be, it'd be like a one-liner one-off. It'd be like a quote machine.
It would be a quote off. That's literally what it would turn into.
Yeah.
No, it'd be awesome. And listen, I'll say this. 4 minutes to go. Got to keep it tight. I'll say this.
Gotta shut up.
Gotta shut the hell up. I think that to have that in the bylaws, that there cannot be teams that play against one another in the spring games, is a gigantic mistake. Like, just from a money standpoint, I'm sure someone tell me in the comments, because I don't understand this. Unless you know, I don't understand why it's always been this way, or it has been this way previously. In every other sport, you scrimmage against other teams. Why are they playing? Why are they playing their own team?
And you know what else this is? I need to look at the
Makes no
NCAA
sense.
bylaws a little further, but okay, it can't go on. It can't be a televised thing. It can't be like an event that 2 teams are playing each other.
Why?
What if Syracuse just went out there and scrimmaged Colorado and nobody knew about it? What if it was just like a practice, like a closed practices thing? Like, I don't know. Just seems like there's some loopholes around that.
Which would be no fun at all,
No
by
fun
the way.
at all. I think it's, like I said, a smarter thing to make it a national thing, to make it a game that has eyes on it, whatever. But certainly an interesting discussion. And maybe the NCAA will change that pretty soon.
I agree. I think that's a dumb rule, and there's a lot of money to be made in just letting these teams compete.
I agree.
Maybe the only thing I can think is like it's a play thing, and you don't want other teams being able to, see some of your plays, but grow up.
Do you know
Find new plays.
Grow up. Get a grip. You know what somebody said? This is the last thing I'll leave you with.
You're fine. You have 3 minutes.
Great. I was like too rushed. I was like, God, we have like a minute. A Syracuse fan said I like quote tweeted Fran's tweet, and a Syracuse fan goes, all right, like that'd be great. Would love to do that. But like Coach Prime, if we go out there, just coaching, no poaching the players.
That's so
a heater.
funny.
Just coaching, no poaching.
That's hysterical.
Yeah.
I love fans. Thank you guys so much for being with us, joining us. We appreciate it. And we will see you back here next week for more.